In a powerful West African kingdom ruled by tradition, ancestry, and silence, a young king ascends the throne at a moment when blood, power, and destiny collide. Newly crowned and still bearing the weight of his father's fading reign, the young king struggled to assert authority in a palace where loyalty is inherited, not earned. His greatest threat does not come from foreign kingdoms and enemies, but from within his own bloodline, his younger brother, Akosua, charismatic, reckless, and increasingly dangerous. At the heart of the palace sits the Queen Mother, a formidable matriarch whose influence had shaped the kingdom for decades. Her love for Akosua is fierce and unapologetic, blinding her to his growing ambition. When the king confronts her about her interference, the argument erupts into a devastating rupture. That ended with a slap across the king's face, his crown falling to the marble floor. In that moment, the line between mother and monarch was severed. The king banished his younger brother Akosua from the kingdom, and his kinsmen. But exile, as the story reveals, is not mercy. It is prevention. While the court resumes its rituals and appearances of stability, the true cost of kingship unfolds in private. The king's wife, Amma, a calm and perceptive presence, becomes his emotional anchor. Yet even she senses the danger lurking beneath the surface. A terrifying nightmare of capture, binding, and death shakes her awake, echoing the unrest spreading through the kingdom. Unbeknownst to the king, the Queen Mother is fighting her own desperate war in the shadows. In a powerful flashback, she kneels beside her dying husband, the former king, begging him to intervene and overturn their son's decision. Though frail, the old king speaks with unwavering clarity. The exile of Akosua is necessary. The kingdom cannot survive with two suns in one sky. Refusing to accept this, the Queen Mother turns to the spiritual realm, seeking the village oracle to bend fate itself. The oracle sat cross-legged before the shrine fire, his face streaked with white ash, his eyes hidden behind a cowrie-covered mask. He did not turn as she approached. "I have come for help," the Queen Mother said, her voice unsteady. "The king, my son, has chosen wrongly. He means to exile his brother. I need you to speak to the spirits, to cast a spell that will cloud his judgment at dawn. Let him say something else. Let him change his mind." The oracle stirred the embers with a carved stick. Sparks leapt into the air like tiny stars. Then he spoke, his voice deep and layered, like many voices speaking at once. "I have spoken to the ancestors," he said. "They have already decided." Her heart sank. Decided what? That the exile of Akosua will bring peace, stability, and prosperity to the kingdom? She took a step forward, her face twisting in disbelief. "It can be overturned. You have the spiritual power," the Queen Mother said. The oracle's mask turned toward her. "The spirits have spoken. To defy them is to invite ruin." The Queen Mother's eyes glistened. "Then let ruin come," she whispered. "For what is peace if it cost me my son?" But the oracle had already turned back to the fire. The embers glowed brighter, throwing her shadow across the shrine wall, tall, trembling, and alone. She stood there for a moment, staring into the flame as if it might change its answer. When it didn't, she turned and walked back into the darkness. The ancestors delivered the verdict that Akosua's exile will bring peace, stability, and prosperity. The Queen Mother left the shrine defeated, rejected by both mortal and divine authority. As the dawn approached, Akosua made one final, reckless move. In a tense, explosive moment, he attempted to rally disloyal guards and unseat his brother by force. The coup collapsed almost instantly. The king confronts Akosua face to face, calm and resolute, exposing his brother's true intentions before the palace. The failed attempt confirmed what prophecy, instinct, and fear had already warned. Exile is not cruelty. It was necessity for the peace and prosperity of the kingdom. Akosua is led beyond the last boundary of the kingdom, deep into a forbidden forest feared for generations. And at the point of no return, an oracle's messenger performs the ancestral rites and rituals of banishment, severing Akosua from the kingdom and his kinsmen, from blood, the throne, and name. Akosua stepped into the evil forest and its scary darkness alone, swallowed by the forest, banished for life, never to return to the kingdom. Back in the palace, the Queen Mother collapses under the weight of her loss. She had lost one son to exile and another to kingship. In grief-stricken solitude, she remembers her husband's final words and realizes the cruel truth of destiny. A mother can lose a child without burial, without death, without closure. As the kingdom marks the exile with drums and ceremony, another ending unfolds quietly. Hours earlier, unknown to the Queen Mother, the king had been summoned to his father's sickbed. In an intimate, sacred rite witnessed by the chief oracle, the dying king places his hands upon his son's crowned head, blessing his reign, his life, and his future. Prayers are spoken, ancestral rites are sealed. The young king weeps openly as wisdom passes from one generation to the next. With a final cough and a final breath, the old king dies. Outside, the drums continue, not in celebration, but in transition. The young king emerges fully alone, bearing a crown that is no longer symbolic but absolute. He has chosen order over blood, duty over love, and destiny over mercy. The kingdom stands on the brink of peace, but at the cost of innocence. And far beyond the palace walls and the depths of the forbidden forest, in a strange land, in exile and isolation from his kinsmen and his father's kingdom, he plotted his return. Akosua's story had not ended. It had only just begun. 2 years had passed since the death of the old king. 2 years since Akosua had been swallowed by exile. The kingdom had known peace, or something close to it. The markets thrived. The borders held. The drums beat in rhythm again. Yet peace, like silence, sometimes only waited. In the dead of night, Queen Amma was seized by a second, far more terrifying nightmare. This time the vision is not symbolic or vague. It was vivid and unmistakable. She saw her husband, the king, captured and broken. She saw him beg the Queen Mother for help, only to be refused. She saw the palace burn and the kingdom collapse into ruin. When Amma wakes screaming, the entire palace was thrown into alarm. Lamps are lit, guards are summoned, and sleep becomes impossible. Amma knew this wasn't just a dream, it is a warning. That night Amma screamed, not softly, not in confusion, but with terror sharp enough to wake the palace. She jolted upright in bed, her body slick with sweat, her breath ragged, her eyes wild. This was no wandering dream of shadows and fear. This was clear. She had seen her husband, bound, bruised, dragged through dust and ruin. She had seen him beg, not to the gods, not to the people, but to the Queen Mother. "Help me," he pleaded in the dream, his crown shattered at his feet. The Queen Mother stood unmoved. She turned away. The palace burned. The kingdom cracked. The land fell into silence. Amma gasped awake, clutching her chest as though the dream had left a wound behind. Servants rushed in. Lamps were lit. Guards stood at every doorway. No one slept after that scream. Not in the king's household. Not in the palace. This was not a dream of doom. It was a warning. Seen, the shrine awakens. At the same hour, far from the palace walls, the oracle rose from his mat. He had not been dreaming. The pounding came again. Bang, bang, bang! The shrine door shook under the force. The oracle wrapped his robe around himself and opened it. The female high priest burst inside, breathless, her eyes blazing. Half her body was streaked with white chalk. Her feet were bare, her movements restless. "Why are you sleeping?" she demanded. Before he could answer, she began to sing. War songs in an ancient dialect, her voice sharp and trembling. She danced in frantic circles, bowing her head, striking the earth with her palms. "The storm is coming," she cried. "Are you ready?" She paced the shrine, her staff rattling against the floor. "Prepare for war," she said. "The clouds are gathering. The eagles must not be defeated." The oracle frowned. "What is it?" he asked. She stopped suddenly and turned to him. "No one sleeps when their roof is on fire." Silence fell between them. Then she spoke, slower now, heavier. "The storm is here," she said. "We have an enemy in our midst." The oracle's jaw tightened. "You must inform the king," she said. "At first light." Scene, a kingdom awake. That night, no lamp was extinguished in the palace. Amma sat wrapped in white, refusing to lie down again. The king held her hand, listening as she spoke of what she had seen. Every detail, every image, every plea. Outside, guards doubled their watch. The drums did not sound. Even the night birds were silent. Somewhere beyond the walls, the oracle prepared his message. And somewhere farther still, beyond forests, beyond memory, something long exiled stirred. The kingdom had believed the storm was over. It had only been waiting. The exile that once brought peace has not ended the story. It had only delayed the storm. Before the break of dawn, the young king received the oracle in the most private space of the palace, the privy chamber. By the oracle's request, the meeting was held in absolute secrecy, away from scribes, guards, and ritual witnesses. What was discussed cannot survive daylight. The oracle delivers a grave warning from the ancestral realm. A storm is no longer approaching. It has already arrived. There is an enemy within the kingdom, one hidden behind familiarity, loyalty, and access. The threat was not foreign, it was intimate. In response, the king shared the young Queen Amma's recurring nightmares. Visions of his capture, his pleas for help, the Queen Mother's refusal, and the kingdom's descent into ruin. As the king recounts the dream in full, the oracle recognizes the convergence of prophecy and vision. This is not imagination, the oracle said. This is alignment. When prophecy and dream echo one another, it means that your great ancestors are watching over you. The gods of your forefathers are not asleep. They are watching over you and the kingdom. When ancestral messages align across dreams and spiritual signs, the oracle explains, it signals inevitability rather than possibility. The oracle rose, shaken but resolute, and confirms the danger is real. The dreams are not fear, they are foresight. What neither man realized was that the chamber's privacy wasn't an illusion. Unseen, unheard, a loyalist to Akosua listened from within the palace's inner guard, absorbing every word. The very space meant to protect truth becomes compromised. The meeting ended with the king resolved to act carefully, choosing patience over confrontation. The king was told to observe, wait, and prepare. The king understands that the greatest threat to his reign wasn't open rebellion, but betrayal disguised as devotion. The storm has named itself, and it lives inside his own walls. That same night, the king summoned his royal court, the Privy Council. Only the few, only the trusted, and only the ones he could count on their loyalty. At the oracle's urging, details of security was discussed extensively. The kingdom borders, the guards, and their loyalty. However, just before the meeting began, one advisor approached the king and leaned in quietly. "My king," he said, "I saw Kwame earlier tonight." The king turned. He entered the Queen Mother's quarters. Secretly, "I have been told that this has been going on for some time now." The room went still. The king did not speak immediately, but something in his expression hardened, not with anger, but with clarity. The storm had not only arrived, it had names. As suspicion deepens within the palace, the king chooses restraint over confrontation as advised by the oracle. Rather than accuse Kwame of his late-night clandestine visits and secret dealings with the Queen Mother, the king authorizes a covert surveillance operation to monitor Kwame's movements and test his loyalty to the throne. The palace quietly transforms into a web of watchers and listeners. Privately, Amma confronts her husband with the emotional cost of his choices, asking how far he is willing to go to stop his brother's descent into madness, and whether the truth might destroy his relationship with his mother. That evening, the king sat alone with Amma in their inner chamber. The room glowed softly with oil lamps, the air warm and heavy with incense. Outside, the palace breathed, guards pacing, servants murmuring, but inside, only the truth pressed between them. Amma studied her husband's face, searching for cracks he did not show to the world. "How far will you go?" she asked quietly. "To force the truth from your mother, my king." He did not answer. "How far will you go?" she continued, her voice tightening. "To stop your brother and his madness." She moved closer, lowering her voice as though the walls themselves might listen. "I don't want to lose you," she said. "Not to the throne, not to your blood brother." The king reached for her hand, his grip steady, but colder than before. "I will go as far as the kingdom demand," he said at last, "and not one step further." Amma nodded, though fear lingered in her eyes. She had seen what destiny demanded, and she had seen what it took. As evidence mounts, the king uncovers a devastating conspiracy: the planned abduction of the kingdom's oracle and chief priest, the installation of false spiritual leaders, and the orchestration of Akosua's forced coronation. Kwame's clandestine meetings with the Queen Mother were no longer rumor. They were mapped, timed, and verified. And the plan, when fully uncovered, was darker than the king had imagined. They would not merely unseat him, they would unmake the kingdom's spiritual spine. The oracle, the chief priest, both were marked for abduction and elimination. In their place, strangers, pliant and unrooted, willing to rewrite ancestral law, would be installed. They would be the new voices, new rights, and a false legitimacy crafted in ritual and fear. Akosua would return not as a usurper, but as a crowned inevitability. It was not rebellion, it was deadly erasure, carefully scripted and planned. But just hours before the plot is set to unfold, the king confronts Kwame. The king summoned Kwame just hours before the planned kidnapping. No guards were present, no witnesses, only stone walls and truth. Kwame entered the chamber confidently at first, until he saw the king standing, not seated, his crown absent, his expression stripped of ceremony. "Why are you really here?" the king asked. Kwame hesitated. "Are you here for the kingdom?" the king continued, stepping closer. "Or for a friend you have sworn allegiance to and sold your soul for?" The air thickened. Kwame's mouth opened, closed, his breath quickened. "Treason," the king said softly, "is punishable by death." The word struck like a blade. Kwame collapsed to his knees. The mask fell away completely. He confessed, not with pride, but with terror. Every meeting, every signal, every promise made in shadows. He spoke of the Queen Mother's resolve, Akosua's growing forces, the timing of the abduction. Faced with execution for treason, Kwame confesses, but offers a dangerous bargain in his plea for mercy in order to avoid the death penalty for treasonous crime. "Long live my king," he said. "Please allow the plan to proceed as bait, to lure Akosua back into the kingdom so he and the Queen Mother can be apprehended at once." The king is left to choose between immediate justice and a calculated trap that could end the threat forever. Then the king authorizes the plan. Under the guise of inaction, the palace becomes a snare. Guards are repositioned, messages are subtly altered, and conspirators are allowed to believe their plans remain hidden. Kwame continued in his role as informant, unaware that every word now tightens the noose. Parallel to this, the Queen Mother wrestles with her final justification. Alone with her reflection, she convinces herself that maternal loyalty must outweigh the laws of kingship. To her, Akosua is not a traitor, but a rightful heir robbed by prophecy and fear. She resolves that history will forgive her, so long as her son survives. As Kwame reports success and Akosua prepares to return, both sides move toward the same dawn, each believing destiny favors them. Neither fully understands the cost of what has been set in motion. Then the unexpected return of the banished. Later, alone again, that night, the Queen Mother stood at her window. The palace glowed softly under the moon, unaware it had been turned into a snare. Kwame knelt before her as he always had. "The time is near," he said. "The oracle remains unguarded. The chief priest moves freely. The palace suspects nothing." The Queen Mother studied him. "Akosua?" she asked. "He is ready. He believes the spirits will favor him." She closed her eyes briefly. "Then let the spirits bear witness," she said. Kwame hesitated. "There is risk." "There is always risk," she replied, "but history does not remember the careful, it remembers the victorious." She rose. "This kingdom was built by men who took what destiny hesitated to give them," she continued. "If my son must be called a usurper to save his birthright, then let him wear the name." Kwame bowed lower. Behind them, unseen, a guard shifted his stance slightly, and a signal passed, unnoticed. Unknown to the Queen Mother, trap had tightened. That night, two plans moved toward the same dawn. One built on deception, the other on belief. And neither side understood yet that the trap was not merely for Akosua, but for the idea that power could still be inherited without consequence. Just over 2 years after his exile, Akosua crosses back into the kingdom he was forbidden to return to, hardened by survival and fueled by vengeance. Akosua crossed the boundary stone at dawn. The mark that once ended his life in the kingdom now felt like a beginning. Convinced the palace has been spiritually and politically compromised, he advances with loyal guards and kinsmen, believing victory is assured. He did not come alone. Men emerged with him from the tree line, loyalists who had followed him into shadow, kinsmen bound by grievance, guards who had once sworn oaths to a crown they believed was stolen. They moved quietly, deliberately, convinced they were walking into history. The kingdom appears undefended. No alarms sound. The palace welcomes him in silence. Interpreting this as fate's approval, Akosua steps forward to reclaim what he believes is his birthright. It was too late when he realized that the stillness was deliberate. The trap closed with precision. Loyal guards emerge, exits seal, and the king reveals himself, calm, crowned, and waiting. Akosua is subdued, betrayed by the very network that promised him triumph. As he is forced to his knees, he finally understands that exile was not his punishment. His return was, and it was his downfall. With Akosua captured, the palace confronted the truth of how close it came to collapse. The Queen Mother watched the consequences of her choices unfolded. Forced to reckon with the line she has crossed between love and treason, the king, having saved the kingdom without bloodshed, stood victorious, but deeply alone. Although the threat was neutralized, the damage was permanent. Trust within the royal household was shattered. Blood brothers had turned against blood, and the prophecy that once warned of ruin had merely transformed. Peace was finally preserved, but innocence had not. Then the king appeared at the top of the steps, crowned. The Queen Mother stood at the edge of the courtyard. Their eyes met. For a fleeting moment, something human flickered between them. Not defiance, not loyalty, but recognition. This is what I chose. The king turned away. Exile had not been his punishment. His return was. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the growth of our YouTube channel and keep more stories coming your way. Don't go yet. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't, because the ending of this story will blow your mind. And don't forget to watch out for our latest upload, an explosive viral story titled The Baby Mama Drama, the secrecy, the betrayal, the whispered conversation, the intimate affair, and the secret the baby mama wouldn't tell. Thanks for watching. Akosua's return to the kingdom ends not in triumph, but in revelation. Still dressed as a king and flanked by armed loyalists, he suddenly realizes he has been lured into a carefully laid trap. Surrounded by palace guards, his arrogance drains away, replaced by quiet disbelief. The crown he wears becomes an accusation rather than a symbol of power. His false victory collapses without violence. The pride that had carried him across the boundary stone, that had sustained him through exile and vengeance, drained quietly from his face. In its place came something far more devastating than rage: understanding. The courtyard, moments ago filled with imagined triumph, felt suddenly smaller. The white pillars loomed closer. The air thickened. Even the armed men who now encircled him seemed distant, unreal. This was not defeat by force. This was defeat by foresight. Akosua lowered his eyes. The false victory shattered without a sound. From the upper steps, the king watched in silence. He felt no surge of triumph, no satisfaction, only a deep, steady stillness settle into his bones, like the final piece of a long, painful truth falling into place. The gods of your forefathers are not asleep, the oracle's voice echoed in his mind. They are watching over you in the kingdom. The king exhaled slowly. This had not been Akosua's first attempt, but it would be his last. In that moment, the king understood something his father had known long before him. Power secured through patience endures longer than power seized through blood. He had won without brutality, without spectacle, without becoming the very thing he sought to stop. The crown on his head no longer felt borrowed. It felt earned. The Queen Mother, having crossed the final line between maternal love and treason, witnesses the consequences of her choices. Her punishment is not death, but removal from power. She is banished from the palace, cut off from influence, proximity, and legacy, left to live within the kingdom she once controlled, but no longer command. Years later, as the kingdom prospers under stable rule, Akosua, now imprisoned, wrote a long letter to his brother. In it, he confesses his failures, seeks forgiveness, and finally understands the truth he once rejected. Exile was not his punishment. Return was. And in a stone-walled, secured prison far from the palace halls, Akosua wrote. His hands were older, slower. The ink trembled slightly as he formed each word. Your Highness, my brother, I finally understand. He wrote of life in exile, of pride, of the lie he had mistaken for destiny. He wrote of how exile had not broken him, but his return had. Exile was not my punishment, he admitted. Returning, believing myself chosen, only to be revealed as wrong. That was my punishment. He asked for forgiveness without expectation. Not as a prince, not as a rival, but as a man who had finally learned. The king read the letter alone. He did not respond. Some forgiveness did not need words. The storm had passed. Not because it was fought, but because it was understood. And in that understanding, the king's reign was sealed, not by prophecy alone, but by restraint, wisdom, and the courage to choose peace when violence would have been easier. Exile had removed Akosua from the kingdom. Return had stripped him of illusion. And kingship, true kingship, had revealed itself not in conquest, but in the patience to wait, in the strength to end a war before it began.